welcome to the New Earth podcast, which will guide you towards awakening and the embodiment of your highest self through holistic living advice, science, yoga, personal experiences, and expert guests. Let's grow together and build a new Earth. I'm Nancy Crupi, I'm a scientist, and I have a PhD in biology and 15 years of international scientific research experience in fields from inflammation to aging, neurobiology, nutrition, metabolic disorders, and much more. I'm also a Kundalini Awakened spiritual teacher, healer, and coach, and I practice and teach Kundalini Tantra.
And I'm Robie Newman-Paris. I'm a biologist with experience in neuroscience, and I've studied the ancient yogic sciences as well as other Eastern philosophies with gurus and yogis while spending a year and a half in India and in Bali. I now teach Kriya Yoga, breathwork, and meditation and help guide people in their spiritual development. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the New Earth podcast. I'm Robie. I'm joined by Nancy, as always. Today, we're going to be going into the third part of our, what probably is going to be a three-part series on healthy lifestyle, balanced lifestyle habits, techniques, routines. Today, we're going to be discussing a few more topics in this genre. We're going to be touching on circadian rhythm and the importance of having routines and schedules in your day that are set and that you kind of follow from day to day. And then we're also going to touch into the aspect of sacred space, how to spiritualize your life, and how to treat yourself as a temple of the divine presence. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today. I would like to just start off, Nancy, can you give us a little bit of an introduction about circadian rhythms and why they're so important from a biological standpoint?
Absolutely. Thank you, Robbie, for the introduction. So the circadian rhythm simply means the rhythm that our body follows in alignment with the sunlight and with the cycles of nature. And usually sunlight is really what really impacts the most on us, but there are also other things that impact on us, such as food consumption. So our circadian rhythm, has been built since forever, not just in humans, but in animals and like all creatures in nature, based on the sun. So how the sun and the moon also go, in cycles. And so we have sunrise and sunset, right? And then we have moonrise and moonset, but also we have all the cycles of the moon. The circadian rhythm is mostly related to what happens daily, so mostly to the cycles of the sun rising and then setting and then staying high in the sky for most part of the day. And this is why in ancient times, people used to having to do most of their activities during the day because there's sunlight, right? And so because of that, we have now evolved to really have optimal body functions during the daytime, because that's what we've been doing for most part throughout our evolution. We've mostly been eating and running and doing physical activity and doing everything daytime. And so at night, our body is not really optimized to do those things. However, during the night, our body is still doing something important, but it's like the opposite. And so the thing is that we need both cycles. We need both what we do during the daytime and what we do during the nighttime, our body does. But it's important to do those things also in alignment with the sun, because the sun, by even just as soon as we wake up and we see the light, immediately our brain starts being affected. We start producing more serotonin, more hormones that are related to us also interacting with the world around us. And instead, during the night, we tend to produce more melatonin. And literally, it's the same pineal gland that produces both, and that transforms the one in the other. And so when we have serotonin, we don't have melatonin, and vice versa in a sense. So when we have that melatonin at night, then what happens is that our body goes more into a sleepy mode and also does a lot other functions, including dreaming and consciousness, that tend to rise more during the night or when the sun sets. It's because of melatonin, and that's so important for us, right? So both parts of the cycle are fundamental for us. So we need to understand that we need to match this kind of cycle, but also not only the sunlight, but also when we get our first bite. Our first bite tells our digestive system, from now on, I'm going to be eating for the next few hours, because that's what we've been doing throughout history and throughout evolution. And so our body knows as soon as we actually, as soon as we smell food, as soon as we see food, and as soon as we get the first bite, immediately our body starts getting ready to first chew, then digest, then absorb. And so all of our organs get ready at the right time. There are actually articles, I have personally published scientific articles on this, but there are people working specifically on how the different organs change throughout the day. And so organs start producing, like the liver, the stomach, the pancreas, all our organs involved in digestion and in absorption and in detoxifying the food and processing the food are really in alignment with this. And so as soon as we get the first bite, the liver knows, okay, in a couple of hours, I'm gonna have to filter these things. And so it starts activating genes and protein and enzymes that are necessary for the following phases. So it doesn't do it immediately, because when you get the first bite, you don't need your liver right away. But it does it in a way that in 2 hours it's gonna be able to. And I'm saying 2 hours just to give you an idea. But like all organs are exactly set to activate at a certain time, because they know that based on when you get the first bite, they're going to be needed in a bit and they need to be ready, right? And so when we mess up this schedule and we start eating at night or binge eating or eating in ways that really don't allow our body to get ready for our food, what happens is simply that we keep ingesting and having to digest and absorb that food. We're just not going to be able to do that as well as we could. And so most of the things that we eat are not going to be absorbed, or are not going to be absorbed or absorbed properly or detoxified properly. And so we just accumulate byproducts and like dirt, right? That then goes in our body and becomes poisonous. And so it's important to really fit our circadian rhythm in that sense from a biological standpoint, because it also allows us to, again, goes well with the serotonin and melatonin cycles that allow us to really fulfill both the daily activities, which are more about, interacting with people. So serotonin is the hormone of happiness, but it's also good for communication, for being in the world, for observing, to actually be active in the world out there. While melatonin is more about your inner world, more about you getting back into your own consciousness, into your own inner self. And so those things are necessary at the right time, and at the same time facilitate different kinds of functions. So if you try to do things during the day that you're supposed to do at night, you're just not going to be as good as you could as if you would do that during a night. And same thing vice versa, right? So unfortunately, people that work at night, for example, have a lot of metabolic issues because of that, because that kind of messes up our metabolism. And a lot of people working in healthcare where they can't have fixed, shifts, because they oftentimes have to work either at night or in the day, and they change often. Obviously, with time, they develop certain plasticity, which is still good for them. But still, it's definitely stressful for people to do these sort of jobs, because there is a lot involved that has to do with you breaking this cycle, this connection between you and the cycles of nature and the cycle of things. And now we can tap into later into also the lunar cycles, because we follow those cycles as well, or we should follow, because our body is already tapped into those things. And so it's just a matter of understanding how to go with these flows and with these cycles that already exist. And do you, Robbie, follow the circadian rhythm?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing. I want to, just really emphasize here for people. This means that the rhythm that you follow is basically the same every day. And that's the really important key. And that's, again, going back to the healthcare angle that you were talking about earlier, or anyone that's working any of these overnight shifts, especially if you're working a mixture of overnight shifts and a mixture of day shifts. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be related to work. Let's say you're a college student and, you know, during the week you stay up till 3 or 4 a.m. studying, and then on the weekends you go to bed at 10 because you need to catch up on your sleep. In some senses, this is even worse than just going to bed at 4 a.m. every night, because our bodies work in a systematic way. We learn, we're habitual creatures, and we're very, very good at following the same patterns. When we get into a groove of doing the same thing at the same time every day, our body adjusts to that, and it makes it be able to be streamlined in, like Nancy said, all of its functioning in both the digestive process, the process of our neurochemistry, the process of just being in homeostasis, really is benefited by having the same rhythm. And we can maximize this effect by aligning with the rhythm that we're supposed to be on as a diurnal creature. And a diurnal creature basically means like an animal that is supposed to be awake during the day and sleep at night. And as opposed to like a nocturnal animal, like a lot of cats, for example, are nocturnal, lots of like bats. I mean, there's plenty of examples, but they actually have a reverse cycle where their hormone system is the opposite to ours, where they get awake during the night. And we're clearly not designed for that. You can see, I mean, basically, one of the easiest ways is by our eyes. We can't see very well in the dark. And most animals that are up at night, at least the ones that use vision as their primary sense, obviously some like bats are using echolocation, but even bats will have better nighttime vision than us because that's what they're designed for. And so if you look at the human body, let's say get rid of electricity, get rid of fluorescent lighting, maybe you have candles, but at nighttime is the time where, you know, you are brought internally just by the fact that your senses aren't working the same that they are in the day. They're not designed to function in those circumstances. So if you align yourself with that schedule, and especially if you align with being on that schedule every day where you have a set time, it doesn't matter if it's the day that you work or the day that you're taking a rest day, whether you're off work, it should be on the same schedule as much as you can every day. Obviously, it can be hard for people sometimes, but try as best as you can to stick to that schedule because that's how your body is going to be able to function best. It's going to be able to be at its peak performance all the time and really get into the flow of your habits and the flow of processing all of the nutrients in your food and being the most efficient form of the physical body that it can be. And in terms of
Yeah,
the kind of yogic side of things, it's also really
I would
important that
like to
there's
add
certain,
something.
yeah,
I
go
would like to
ahead.
add something to that, to the nocturnal part, because I feel like to be honest, I think that there are some people in humanity that are more nocturnal. I think in general, everything in nature is like a Gaussian of things. When I say Gaussian, I mean like a curve in which the majority of people are like diurnal people. And then on the two sides are people who are very diurnal, and the other side are people who are very nocturnal, right? So I feel like I've been for a long time, and I think nature is perfect. That's why I'm saying this, because I think that everything is ultimately designed to be exactly as it is. For example, for a long time when I was a student, I had issues sleeping my whole life. Now I don't anymore. And I started napping sometimes, which is something I've never done ever. And so I think we really have cycles also, because being a certain kind of person, like I've always been very, very hyperactive, not hyperactive, like very active and dynamic during the day and doing a lot of things. But then I will not need to sleep a lot of hours at night. And so I will stay awake and study and be very active. Like, my mind was mostly active from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. That was the time in which my mind worked best. So I think I've been very nocturnal for a long time. And I think that has to do, that may be considered a form of dysfunction, but I function very well. I've like 3 degrees and one PhD, and acquired in a very short time. So I function very, very well in my life. But I feel like I was very nocturnal, like my brain needed for me to study at night. So I feel like we also have to tap. And this is to say that we're not boxes, not everybody belongs to the same box. That I want to emphasize what you said, that we need to have the same cycle daily, in a sense that that's exactly what our body adapts to. If you do the same thing every day, your body takes it as a habit. And we talked about that during the diet related episode as well, because that's what really constitutes the message you're sending to your body. Okay, as usual, the warehouse, the warehouse knows exactly when the cargo is going to come, and so they can do the best job. So I think that, like, doing the same thing every day is the most important part. But I also think that there should be some flexibility in terms of nocturnal or diurnal, in the sense that some people should really listen to their body, because I think also in different stages of our life, we may actually have different cycles because they're needed for our survival in different ways. Like, for example, during college or when you're young, you may be very, very active and very full of energy, and you don't need to sleep a lot. And you may be very active at night. I don't know about that. Some people are, some people really are not. Some people are very active early morning. I've never been an early morning person. And so I feel like you really, like, this Gaussian of when we are most active really is is a Gaussian of things, like of
Hmm.
distribution of how people function. And there's some people that have a best activity early morning, some people best activity at mid during the day, and then some people have their best activity during the night. So I think it really changes. But obviously we're not nocturnal animals. But this is interesting for me. What I love what you said about, the animals that are nocturnal are more, they have their radar and their sonar and all these things that really function in a different way. And I have this very, very high intuition and perceptiveness that I think I've always thought I must be a nocturnal animal because I used to be very active at night. And the fact that you said that, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I'm experiencing. I'm very perceptive. And even in the dark, I can feel the energies and what is going around me. And I'm very good now that I've reactivated my visual cortex through meditation and through various kinds of Kundalini Tantra and practice. I have reactivated my visual cortex in a way that now I can really, really focus on objects at night very sharply and in a very quick way. So my eyes muscles have really changed. Have become more voluntary or more reactive. So I think it really, like, is not everybody's in the same box. This to say, because I don't want for people to think, oh, I have to follow exactly the same thing that other people do. I think we need to listen to our body. But yes, we need to do the same thing daily in a sense,
Right.
or at least for a certain amount of time of years.
Yeah, I think the crucial thing there is that point, which is following the same schedule every day. And I do agree. I've also experienced similar time courses in my life when I was in college. It was easier for me to stay up late at night. In that sense, maybe that was the best thing for me then. Maybe that was what I needed. I do think, yeah, if you're talking about the Gaussian curve, the center of that curve is, most people are most active in the middle of the day. But again,
Yeah.
it's right. Everything in nature doesn't fit in one narrow box. And there is a big range, a big spectrum of different possibilities that can exist and still be true for people. And still, we're all humans, but some people are a little bit more nocturnal than others, or they have a period in their life where that is. And I do think also it's really interesting where, these kind of cycles do change throughout our lifespan too. And I think that generally, at least what I've seen, the older I've gotten, the earlier that I've started to function. So when I was younger, when I was a kid, when I was very young, I had very bad sleep. And I also worked on that a lot. I think when I started my daily meditation practice, that really made a huge difference in my sleep quality. Especially, I noticed when I was doing meditation practices at night, right before bed, I would fall asleep, within 5 to 10 minutes at the latest. Whereas before, when I was younger, it used to take hours, sometimes to fall asleep, or I'd be, locked in these thought loops about one little thing that I did wrong 3 weeks ago, and I wouldn't be able to sleep for again, yeah, those 3 weeks after that.
Wow.
Um, so that definitely is a factor as well. But definitely, the more older that I've gotten, the easier it has been for me to wake up early, and the more naturally that's been happening. For a long time, my natural wake up time was probably somewhere between 9:30 and 11, depending on the exact age that I was, and I would go to bed somewhere again between 12 and 3 a.m. Now I find that I'm going to bed by like 11 to 12 at the latest, and I feel the best. I feel most aligned when I wake up around 6. And that doesn't mean I'm doing it all the time, but I notice, despite feeling a little bit more tired when I first wake up, and there's that always that feeling of, being very comfortable in bed. But when I push through that and I actually get up and I start acting, I have a higher sense of clarity. My mind is a little bit more clear. Even if it's still more asleep, it's more clear than if I had woken up at 7:30 or 8. So I think that's very interesting. And this also kind of aligns with, the yogic philosophy about the best times to do practice. And this is another thing that, even if you're not doing that much spiritual practice, the best times to be, in yourself and peaceful, reflecting, finding a little bit of inner balance before you get into your day are the early morning periods, and also the time right before you go to bed. Because in the very early morning, specifically, this is like one of the most quiet times in the world. All of the animals that are more nocturnal are already starting to go to bed because the sun will be coming up soon. Most people haven't gotten up yet, and most other animals that are diurnal, maybe they're just starting to wake up, but they haven't fully gotten up yet. So it's a very peaceful time. And this is called, in Sanskrit, it's called Brahma Muhurta, and it's somewhere from around 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. And this is also, like I said, it's the best time to do spiritual practice. If you're doing meditation, this is the time that you really want to do it. If you can wake up earlier enough, it's really, really beneficial. Another interesting fact that makes this time so potent is that this is when the trees start to wake up, because the trees are also on a day-night cycle, as we talked about in the last episode. And, they start making oxygen around 4 a.m. in the morning. They before the sun gets up, that's when they switch, their metabolism switches and they're starting to produce all this fresh oxygen. So if you're awake at this time, you're able to just utilize that energy, that fresh oxygen, which again, oxygen is one of the substances that contains the most prana or vital energy that we have on this earth. So when you're able to utilize that and utilize it when it's just been produced from the trees, obviously the oxygen already exists, but it's been released and it's been put out into the universe, then it's a charged time to do practice. And then also right before you go to bed, as I just said before, this is also a really another strong time to do practice, because when you're in that kind of state, when you're kind of getting into the sleep state, but you're not quite there, your mind becomes more open. You get more access easily to your subconscious states of mind, which again are used in a lot of spiritual practices to order to align the deeper levels of all of your body, whether it's be your
And
mind, your
also,
emotion, your energy, and your physical body. But this is like another potent time. And then also there's a side benefit that you get really good sleep afterwards. So that's another thing that will really help you if you do practice at night.
yeah, and also melatonin, as I was saying, actually starts peaking. These are the times which so melatonin is produced by the pineal gland. And it's so important because it really makes us go into more that deep consciousness kind of level, which is why we dream also at night. And we allows us to access the different levels of consciousness and different dimensions in a sense. And so between, when we're about to get to sleep and then 4 a.m., it's the time in which melatonin peaks. And so that's why also it makes total sense that we are aligned with nature, and the yogic philosophies totally know about that. Like they really knew, even before they knew about melatonin, they had already realized that that is the best time for us to meditate. And it is the best time, in fact, because especially before going to sleep, I feel like that's my best. I get my best, really most conscious. Actually, I get some like trippy meditations before going to sleep, because that's exactly the time of the day in which I can really access different levels of consciousness. So even just laying down in bed and relax and focus on your breath and really allow your body to go into this deep relaxation state so that you can access your consciousness, and everything is quiet, you're in the dark. So it's really like there's nothing else to do. You're not thinking about anything to do, like maybe the day after. But like what I do when I start thinking of things that I need to do the day after, because I don't want to ruin my sleep, is I make a note so that I know that I don't have to keep that thought the whole night, so that I let it go. I put it in a note and it's there. And the morning after, I'm going to find it. And so being, emptying your mind in that sense is really important. But then it's very much, much easier to just reach a very deep meditative state at night before going to sleep, as you're saying.
Definitely. And going now into the next kind of phase of this discussion a little bit, we'll talk about actually why it's so important to have a little bit of time built into your schedule for some kind of spiritual practice. And, this, even if you don't have a spiritual mindset yet, and this is totally okay when you're just getting onto the path, a lot of times what the spiritual mindset looks like for you is that you see that you need to improve yourself. It's really the process of improving yourself that will eventually develop and lead to the spiritual path, because really spiritual development is just the bettering of the higher levels of yourself, the improving of your mental structures, the improving of your emotions, the improving of your energy. But if you have to start in thinking about it just as, oh, I'm just working to become the best version of myself that I can be, and that's the easier way for you to think about it, because maybe you haven't been exposed to any of the deeper layers of your body yet. And it's okay to be skeptical. It's, that's a really important thing about the spiritual path also, is you shouldn't blindly believe anyone, including us, are telling you. These are things that you have to try for yourself and experience for yourself. And that's going to give you the faith and the confidence to know that what we're saying and what all the other masters and, all the other spiritual teachers are saying is true. But really, the teaching has to come inside of you. It's an experiential thing. It's not something that you should just hear and then say, oh, okay, this is true. but then you don't actually pursue it. It's something that you have to pursue it, even if you don't believe it, and just start with the framework of, oh, okay, I'm going to work on myself. I want to be more positive. I want to think more positive thoughts. I want to have more energy. I want to have more calmness and peace in my life. That's really what spirituality is, but we can even just get rid of that word altogether if it's something that could be a roadblock for some people, but anyways, the important thing about this is that we want to have a set period of time every day where we're working on ourselves. We're dedicating some time to meditation, to breathing, to Kundalini Tantra, to Kriya Yoga, to whatever your individual practices. And it could be many different things. It can also have a physical component. You could do, like Hatha Yoga asanas, even like something like a calisthenics workout could be part of this. You can have a whole routine, and it can be something that someone has directly given you. It can be pieces of different things that people have given you. It can be something that intuitively comes to you. A lot of times when people start doing this, you start to feel more in your body. You're like, what do I actually need? Like what's the most thing that's going to help me get back to this state of equilibrium and peace? For some people, maybe their mind is the thing that really needs the most work, and you're, having all these thought loops and all this anxiety, and it's all up here. And then a meditation practice maybe is a really good thing for you, or a breathwork practice, but maybe you're feeling weakness and tiredness in your body, and it's more of a physical thing where your mind is more balanced and calm naturally. Then maybe doing something like, physical yoga like asanas, hatha yoga, it could be something that's more beneficial for you. But in the end, you'll know once you start doing it, you'll know what really the best thing is that you need. And it can be different every day, but the key is that you have the same period every day. This is dedicated to yourself. And again, this is like an act of self-love. This is prioritizing yourself so highly that you're going to take the time every day to do what's in your highest good, even if you have to go out and work and, work for someone else's plan in their company afterwards, or you have to take care of your family. All of these things are good too, but it's really important you take that time to look inside of yourself, to do the work, to start improving yourself. And it's really good to have a regular period, the same period every day that you do this. And again, like I said before, the best times to do this are, the early morning, right after you get up. Maybe you get up, use the bathroom, you take a quick shower so that you feel refreshed, and then you go into your practice. Or if it's at nighttime, again, right before you go to bed, maybe again you brush your teeth, maybe wash your face or take a quick shower, and then you do your practice. Another reason why these two times are really beneficial is that it's important for almost every spiritual practice that you have an empty stomach. So in the morning, right after you get up, obviously you haven't eaten any food yet. Maybe you have a little bit of water or something, but that's all right. But it's a time where the energy of your body is not focused on digestion, so it can be channeled into all of the other uses that it will be needed to be channeled into for a spiritual practice. And then again at nighttime, hopefully you don't eat dinner right before you go to bed, because also this is really a bad practice for your body, as I'm sure Nancy will tell us in a second exactly why that is bad for you. But it's important that you have around at least a 2 hour space between eating meals and then doing practice. So then again, if you eat dinner at like 6 or 7, then you have, that time at like 8 to 9 or even 10 where you can start doing your practice. And then having that set time is really crucial because it also helps build the habit pattern. And, humans, we are habitual creatures. The way that we find ease in doing the same thing is doing it at the same time and repeating it every day. When you start doing something, it might feel very difficult. And this goes for anything that is working on yourself, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's going on a run, whether it's eating healthy food, drinking enough water during the day. The first few weeks might feel very difficult. It might feel like you're having to put all of this effort in, you constantly focusing, really pushing to get through these mental and emotional blocks, this laziness, this stagnation that just kind of comes to us. Again, this tamasic energy. But the key, because if you always have that energy that's feeling like you need to force something, it can be very hard to continually do something. But the key to work around this is to have that habit pattern built where you do the same thing every day at the same time. And then it gets built into our consciousness in a way that you don't have to put in that same effort. And usually what they say is it takes around a month for this habit to build. So after 30 days, if you do the same thing at the same time every day, then it's going to get significantly easier. And you're not going to have to overcome that threshold of effort to actually jump into your practice, or to jump into, going for a run, or eating the salad instead of eating the hamburger. So really it's about just the enough fortitude. All you need is enough to do it for 1 month every day. So if there's a healthy habit, especially spiritual practice, that you want to jump into, take the challenge. Take it as a challenge to yourself. Okay, I'm going to take 30 minutes every day, and I'm going to do this, asana and meditation practice that I found online, or I found through a teacher, and I'm going to do this every day, every morning at 6 a.m. for 30 days. And then after 30 days, I'm going to see, okay, is this something that's working for me, or is it not working for me? And oftentimes, that's exactly the right amount of time to also realize whether it's working for you. Because once it's had the time to kind of integrate into your psyche, into your general conscious, like your functioning patterns that you use throughout your day, you understand whether it's something that's aligned for you or not. So it's also a good amount of time to kind of test a hypothesis of what practice actually you should be doing in a regular basis. But yeah, I think all of those things are really important.
Absolutely. I really love all the things you said. And also, I obviously we are talking about circadian rhythm and the importance of habits in this specific episode. We've talked about other things in general, the other previous two. And I feel like the most important thing is starting to like just deciding to dedicate 10-30 minutes per day to your practice, whatever practice it is, and then just start just to break the ice in a sense. And then if you feel like it's too difficult initially to start a practice that really is too strict in terms of time because your life doesn't allow it, just allow yourself to just do it anytime initially. But then as you will see the benefits of it, that you do it in a good time and away from food, away from like in a time that is at least like a couple hours away from your last meal, I feel like it can be really, really beneficial to the point that you're gonna be like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna try to really make it become a habit that becomes something that I do every day at 6 a.m. or every day before going to sleep. And I love taking the shower before, like having to wash your face, because it's really like I think water has such a powerful it's such a powerful thing. And I feel like that's why also in some religions like Catholic and Christian there is a baptism with water, because it's really like a way of washing out of like awakening us to like getting us back to the here and now. It's really like a very powerful gesture, and not just the water itself but the cold, like the temperature change. And there is a lot to do with that as well, like our own body. I feel like I've said it many times that I think um the heat in general is associated with trauma. And so just having to lower our body temperature with a shower, even if it's cold, but then even if it's with a hot shower, then when you get out of it, you're gonna have that heat shock, like the shock with the temperature that your body feels and gives you the chills a little bit, right? And so those chills, which is the same chills that we get, interestingly, early morning when we wake up and the air is still kind of crispy. So I think those chills are so important to awaken us and to bring us back to consciousness, also because they activate our perceptions. And so our perceptions are handled by our cortical brain. And the cortical brain is the part where consciousness is. And so having to suddenly have this very strong input from the outside, which is the cold, that activates your perceptions. And so your cortex, I think, is really important to drag us into our consciousness immediately in such a short time. And so it makes meditation easier as well. Although it's important also to be comfortable during meditation because you don't want to be distracted if you feel too cold, right? But I think in general, and this goes back to also another thing, which is ice baths, for example. This goes to different kinds of ways of using these sort of perceptions also to tap into that sacred space. Because sometimes the sacred space that you're talking about, which is take this time to really tap into your consciousness um, and to reset and refocus on your consciousness. Because ultimately what happens during the day is that we heat up, we start oxidizing, we go through combustion due to all the stress and all the things we do, and we drift from our consciousness due to oxidative stress, due to heat increasing temperature, and all the things that make us drift from the peaceful self that we are at night. So we drift every time, but then we need to go back to it every night. So this goes back to the circadian rhythm, but in general, we should focus really on getting back to ourself, to our peaceful self, multiple times a day, which can be 2 times, as you said, morning and night, but also multiple times a day will be useful to just take this sacred space and be like, okay, 1 minute or like even a few seconds to remind yourself, I am sacred. I am a sacred being. My mind is sacred. My body is sacred. I am sacred. And so I need to respect myself. I need to make sure that I'm minding my thoughts, that I'm minding what I'm eating, that I'm minding what kind of people I'm allowing into my life and how I am allowing others to treat me, and all of these things that we forget during the day because we're on the go, right? And so it's important to instead refocus every time. And water or temperature, it's a huge help for that, because it's something from the outside that like wakes you up. You're like, okay, now I'm back. I was heating it up too much. I was drifting too much. Now I'm back. So I think I love in general. Now I'm getting the habits of like swimming more often in the pool, or like again, like taking showers, either do that or even just washing your face with water, just even washing your hands with cold water. It just really reminds you that you're here and now. I think the cold is so fundamental, and ice plunges can be extremely powerful for that, because especially if you do it in the right way. If you like, what I do is I cover my stomach so that, especially if I ate already, I don't go into the reason why when we eat we tend to be lesser focused is because the amount of blood we have in our body is always the same. And when we eat, most of our blood flows around the area of our stomach and our intestine to warm it up and to make sure that the enzymes that are supposed to digest the food have their optimal temperature to function. And so most of our blood actually goes towards the stomach and the intestine, which means that we're taking it away from the brain. And so obviously we can't properly work if we have lesser blood, and so lesser nutrients and lesser oxygen in our brain. And so it's normal that our meditation is better when we don't have that burden of food in our intestine. And so it's better to meditate with a fasted stomach, with an empty stomach, or away from the digestion, which is the part in which the blood really goes around the stomach, which is the reason why we tend to have indigestions when we go in the ocean, for example, and we try to swim right after eating, because our blood is all there and we just get a blockage, right? Because we can't use our muscles and the rest of our body. And so it all sends our body into like confusion. And so having these like cold plunges, for example, if you put your hands in front of your stomach so that you don't take away blood from there, really allows you to, like, ice cold, really allows you to get your temperature, your body temperature, so low that you finally reach that peaceful state. And once you reach it and you realize how it feels like, it makes you remember how you're supposed to be and what's your actual sacred space, how sacred you are, and that all the things we usually put on top of it, like are just oftentimes just toxic for us and we don't realize it. And so it's important to rediscover every once in a while, and try with a cold shower sometimes, is to rediscover every once in a while that peaceful state, so that then during the rest of the time you can also just remember that and embody that, even without the cold, without the water, like even in the desert, you can remember that feeling and remember that you are the whole ocean, even if the waves on top are very, very rocky and choppy. You are the whole ocean, and so you can get to the bottom of it and to really feel your breath and feel this peaceful state. So I think in general I love the idea of also taking showers, as you said, because it's
Hmm.
it's very, can be very functional to meditations.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in terms of the energetics of water, water is a cleansing substance. It's going to be able to, anytime you have stress, anxiety, maybe something happens on your drive home, someone cuts you off, and you're like, oh man, I'm trying to be balanced, but that really like gets you a little bit sometimes. And that's all right. It happens to all of us. That shower is your number one tool. It's going to be able to more than just wash off the sweat that is produced from your body during this kind of fight or flight stress moment. It's actually going to energetically cleanse you as well. And that's why it is like, again, it doesn't have to be a really long shower. I'm not saying like go and take three 45-minute showers per day, but even if you just jump in for two minutes, and just let the water cover your body. If you have a pool, jump in the pool. If you're by the ocean, jump in the ocean and get out right away. And then you feel refreshed afterwards. It's very, very easy to feel, even if it is hot shower. Although I do agree, cold showers do often get you more into that state. And again, if it's something that, you really enjoy the hot water like I do, maybe just put it cold at the very last minute, and just be in that cold water for the last 30 seconds of your shower. and feel that cold for a little bit, and you already got to enjoy the heat. It's okay. You'll be fine with 30 seconds of cold. And cold exposure is also really, really beneficial for your health and for your stress. This is something that has so many different like psychological and physiological benefits. It's going to lower your blood
Biological,
pressure.
yeah.
Yeah, it lowers your blood pressure. It literally releases the hormones of stress in your body, and it also gets you very deeply into the meditative state. And another way that you can be even compounded with this is if you go alternating between hot and cold temperatures, because this is just going to cycle your body in such a way that you're able to release through the heat. You're going to sweat out both, the physical toxins in your body and then also the energetic stuff. And then you go in the cold and it just washes everything away. It just completely refreshes you and brings you back to that core of yourself. And even if you think about like the physics of how this is happening, right? All the heat is leaving your body, so your energy and your focus of your body and in like the kind of you know the higher levels that are more focused on your physiological functions, they're going to be brought into your core. Like your core has to be warm. That's like what your body's going to focus on subconsciously. So it also helps you to get into that meditative state where you're focusing on the core of your energetic being, because that's where your subconscious mind is already going. You're already going in that direction, so it's easier to jump into that flow and be with that. And I want to jump back to the idea of sacred space, because I feel like we did introduce this a little bit to everyone, but I want to just like dive into this concept a little more, because this is something that's very, very crucial for understanding. And basically, sacred space, it can be embodied in a physical space also. You could have a little altar. I think it's a really beneficial thing to have, a little place where you put things in your house that are meaningful to you, whether, it's something, a picture of, a teacher, a picture of, one of the prophets of your religion, whether that's like Jesus, whether that's like a yogi or a saint, whether that's Krishna, whether that's Buddha, whether that's Muhammad. Any of these pictures can really help you connect to the divine. You can also add elements of nature. Maybe you have some fresh flowers, maybe you put a seashell on there. Anything that brings you into that state of internal being and happiness and peace. So that's one way to exemplify this idea of sacred space. But the real concept of sacred space is the sacred space that is our physical body. And there's a really beautiful saying that I'm sure most of you guys have already heard, but your body is your temple. And this is a really deep thing when you actually start to think about it, right? Because your spirit, your soul is coming into this physical world and is inhabiting your physical body. And in this way, you can treat this vehicle in many different ways. But the way that is the best and the most aligned is to treat it with respect and love. Treat it as if, every time you're doing something with your body, you're in worship, you're in your temple. And this is there's a lot of different paths of yoga that we'll be talking about in future episodes. But to touch briefly on this one now, there's a path called karma yoga. And karma yoga is basically the spiritualization of actions. And a lot of people think about karma yoga that this is okay, this is maybe I'm taking time to volunteer in like the local homeless shelter, or I'm doing work, I'm helping my roommate to do the dishes, even though they're not my dishes, because it's a form of selfless service. And that is one level of karma yoga. But the higher level of karma yoga, the way that you should really try to apply it in your life, is to make every action a worship of the divine. Everything is dedicated to the greater whole. Every action that you're taking is something that you're giving away as a result of this is for God. Everything is for that infinite being that is all of us. And this is a really good way to think about that sacred space, because that sacred space in your physical body, you embody with your actions. You both the way that you're physically acting in the world, the way that you're thinking, the way that you're letting your emotions or not letting your emotions have control over the way that you're acting, the way that you're thinking. All of these are ways that you embody that sacred space. And like you just think about it, like if you're in a church, if you're in a temple, you're going to act in a certain way. And some of that is from the energy of the place around that, but it's also there's a set of customs and respectful things that you should and shouldn't do in these spaces, and people would embody those things. It's something that it's very important to do. But when you think of your body as that same temple space, like there's a lot of things that we do in our body that we wouldn't do in a church, that we wouldn't do in a temple or in a mosque. So if you start to switch and think about, okay, everything that I'm doing is divine, everything should be spiritualized. And again, like Nancy said earlier, bringing yourself, taking moments, even if it's just a minute or two every hour or so, to come back into that mode and say, okay, like, hmm, maybe that thing that I did in the past hour wasn't the most spiritual thing. It's okay. I'm going to move past it, but I'm going to try to learn from that. I'm not going to try to do that in the same way again going forward. And, again, doing the spiritual practice again every day is going to help you get into that spiritual mindset. It's going to bring more presence into your awareness so that you start to catch the things that aren't in alignment with living in that temple space of your body and giving yourself and the world the most love that you can in that way. So, doing that spiritual practice is really a huge key for this, but also just, really feeling again, the element of gratitude can be brought in here because it is something that is so powerful. Like we have been given this physical body, we have all of these capabilities, even things that we take for granted, like we have the ability to use speech, we have hands so that we can interact with the world, we can see the world with our eyes. All of these things are great, great blessings and great miracles that we just take for granted. And the more that you can bring that element of gratitude in for the little things, the more that you'll be able to spiritualize your consciousness, the more that you'll be able to act as if you are in that temple space all the time and hold that sacred space for yourself and for others. And, there's many times you can bring gratitude in. Gratitude, you can use it whenever you want, anytime anything good happens, but there's definitely certain times that are very conducive to that habit. And that's when you're ingesting anything. So whether you're taking a sip of water, whether you're eating a meal, just taking, a couple seconds or a minute to feel grateful before you take a sip of that delicious looking lemon water and feeling that you're grateful for that lemon that was grown from the earth and is providing you with that nice vitamin C, that nice kind of bitter sour flavor that's accentuating your water. Or whether, before you eat your meal, you say, wow, like think about the process that all this food took to get into your bowl. Maybe the beans were grown from the earth, they came up from the plant, they were plucked, the farmer took them, processed them, and then they came to the store, and then you got them. And there's all these little steps that came to get you that food, and they're all very meaningful. And the more grateful you can feel for all of those steps, the more you're going to be able to receive from your food, and the more that energy of gratitude is going to be transmuted into your body. And again, this will also build on that sacred space, that spiritual consciousness that we all need to work towards.
Yeah, and I think I love the fact that I think this is how I live personally. I didn't even know that there was a whole philosophy on this, like karma yoga. I feel like that's exactly how I'm living. Like I'm really like not, I feel like I will not use the word spiritualizing, but more like making whatever you do an act of taking care of the whole, right? It's
Mhm.
like I feel like we all tend to think as a tumor things instead of as a cell of our body things, because we all try to get things for our own self instead of get things that are aligned with the whole. And obviously everything is designed to be perfect. Like we live in a divine order of things. And so even if we believe we're doing that, we're really our fight or flight mode is designed to ultimately make us behave exactly which the way we are supposed to behave for the divine order of things to happen in that way. And sometimes when things drift too much, like when there are wars and people start killing a lot of people, like in Gaza, for example, then there is a whole reaction to that and a whole wave of reaction to that because there is an imbalance. But so in general, I think everything is designed to be perfect. And so if we start thinking as a cell of our body, and if we start thinking, okay, thank you, blood, for giving me all of these nutrients. Thank you. And you start thinking everything, even the bad things supposedly that you perceive as bad, you realize that everything is meant to keep you in the place in which we need to stay for you to survive and to continue to have nourishment, and at the same time keep you from doing things that are wrong for you or that are like detrimental for you or for the whole, and allow you to exert your function and your skills in ways that are actually good and positive. So I think we perceive also things that are supposedly bad for us, even people who get unemployment and things, or like very bad situations in their life. Oftentimes it's all part of a design, in a sense. It's like all part of a divine order, because maybe we're drifting too much. Maybe we were using our skills in the wrong way. I feel like we should have a law that doesn't allow people to sell their skills for money to do things that go against the collectiveness. And we supposedly have these laws, but nobody actually respects them right now. So we should not be allowed to be paid to do anything that goes against the collectiveness, such as fast food restaurants, such as things that are poisonous for the world, such as anything that is poisonous for the whole, we should not be allowed to get paid to do that, because that's like, what are you doing, right? You're building your own grave. So it doesn't really make any sense. And so that's why we need to karmify, to spiritualize, or to make every action meaningful, so that we think before doing whatever we're doing, and we are just trying to make the world better. And every time we do something that ultimately brings pain or suffering, or in some way makes things be worse than what they could have and should have been, then we should think, okay, am I actually doing what I'm supposed to do? Like, maybe I should have done this differently. And so I think in general, I think this is how I live, like really, like I always try to do things in, like, I'm grateful for everything I receive, even the bad things, because they're ultimately ways of building in a direction that is the right direction. Like, the reaction to anything that happens is always something good, in a sense. And so I have it tattooed here that says nothing bad can happen, because it's really what I mean, like everything that happens is meant for divine purposes, in a sense. And so we should really think like a cell in our body, in which everything the cell does is like, okay, I'm giving this for the whole body, I'm doing this for the whole body, someone else is gonna find good in this that I'm doing. So I think this is the really right way of doing things. And I want to go back just a second to the cold and how that affects our body, because guys, we can change our whole epigenome just with a cold shower, with a nice bath. Because our body also, first of all, the cold temperature stimulates our lymphatic system to drain. And so if you don't have cold, and this is, for example, in California, I live in California, and sometimes it's challenging. Like, my body had to adapt to this weather in which it rarely gets to a lower temperature. And so my body now adapted to have these kind of changes every day. Like, every day, basically, the temperature changes a lot between night and day, but it stays like there are no seasons. It's like an eternal spring or fall. So we never have real winter, for example. So my body had to adapt to a completely different climate, because I come from Italy. But now I have adapted to these changes throughout the day, in which my body knows that I'm going to be draining thanks to the colder, quote unquote, um, colder temperature of the night. So if I go to a place that is tropical and there is no change in temperature, or like these days in which it's going to be 80 to 100 all day long in LA for like the next couple of days, then my body doesn't drain anymore. And so I start accumulating fluids and getting like bloated. And it's just so cold temperature is so fundamental for us to drain also toxins, because the lymphatic system is what drains also the toxins that we absorb, but also to change the way in which we express genes, because especially when we go into stress and our temperature rises a lot, we produce what they're called heat shock protein. Heat shock protein are protein that are produced under heat shock, which means temperature stress, and they are not really good for you, in a sense that they start being in a fight or flight mode, kind of like alarming your body that something is changing. So they start trying to fix the problem. So we need to really decrease the temperature of our body for us to have a more peaceful state, in a sense. And so that's really, really helpful. But the sacred space, to go back after this little point, the sacred space is so important in so many ways, as Robbie was saying, and it's not just about a specific time of the day. It's about you considering your body a temple. It's about you taking the space and the time to have your altar and to not worship gods or anything else, but just really like be reconnected to the divine, whatever the divine looks for you. It may be an animal, it may be a picture of a saint, it may be a picture of a prophet, it may be anything. It may be sage. Like I often use sage and Palo Santo as part of my altar, because it's really something that I use to purify the air and purify my energy. And so that's part of my altar. And then I have a lot of plants around, and like I don't have specific pictures of anybody, but like I have a little cross here for Jesus Christ. And I have a lot of different things that I do, and I integrate in my own mind without having physical thing. So you don't even need anything physical in a specific space if you don't have space for that. But just try to have a ritual that you do often, like which may be burning sage, like a ritual that you do throughout your day, and that brings you back to, okay, I'm sacred. Everything is sacred. It's not just me. Everything. People that I talk to in the street are sacred, even when they act crazy. Like they're ultimately sacred. So people need to understand, and if they don't know that they're sacred, I'm gonna teach them, because like we need to be examples also. And so it's
Yeah.
important to, yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I
But
just
by the
what
way,
what you said was really beautiful, and I think like the one thing that I really loved was the part about making little rituals for yourself, because humans are ritualistic creatures. This is how we've developed. When we were living in little tribes, everything was based on ritual. And so this is like encoded into, our like evolution, into our like the way that we function in the world. And, rituals are basically, let's call it like a spiritual habit, a habit that you do that has a specific connotation that brings you back into that spiritual mindset, into that presence. And again, doing any kind of spiritual practice is also a form of a ritual. But just because something is not, maybe it looks a little bit more mundane, doesn't mean that you can't make it into a ritual. Maybe your ritual is every time you come home, you wash your hands and you splash water in your face. Or every time that you wake up in the morning, you light an incense stick. Or maybe, when the sun goes down, you light a candle so that there's a little bit of natural fire light in your room. But all of these things could be rituals. It depends on the context that you treat them with. So it's like, when you go into that, specifically take this action and make the effort of saying, okay, this action, whenever I take this action, it's going to remind me to come back into myself, to come back into my love, to come back into that spiritual awakened consciousness that we all come from. And that will give you so much more power. This action becomes a physical manifestation of that consciousness coming out into the forefront of your being. And so using these things, and again, it's something that's like a habit too. It's, the more they use it, the stronger that it can get. And it's also something that, you can almost use like a crutch when you're really in a bad place. Maybe you had a really tough day or something really bad happened. You can do that ritual, and it's going to bring in the accumulation of all the positive energy from every time that you've done it before, because this is how they work. It's like you're reconnecting to that same sacred space that you've started to create for yourself. And just like a fire, the more little pieces of wood that you put into the fire, the stronger the flame is going to be. So each time that you, let's say, light that incense stick or light the candle or wash your face, you're adding one more little piece of wood to that fire of this ritual. And the more strong the flame of the ritual gets, the more power it has to actually take you out of your suffering, to take you out of your head, to take you out of, the stress and anxiety that's built up from a long day's work. And you can also make rituals like something that you can't light incense at work, but you can wash your face. It can be something that you can do any particular time. Maybe it's just your ritual is, okay, like I'm feeling stressed. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to take one really deep conscious breath. And then I'm going to touch the earth to so reground. It can be something that you can do anywhere. And you can have many different little rituals like this. It's like, the more that you have, even it's like the better, as long as you're still able to put that same meaning into them and make it so that, ritualizing becomes just a process that you do every day at specific times or specific situations, specific circumstances. Um, really other a very powerful practice. So thank you for that. Word itself is a really powerful word, I feel like. So thank you for using that in this context, Nancy.
yeah, thank you, Robbie, for saying all of these things. I really love a lot what you said. I think we should definitely do these things multiple times a day. And it can be anything, as you said. And the more you do it, the deeper you go into that space. And the deeper that space becomes and the bigger it becomes as the flames, right? And so every time you come back, you don't come back to the surface that you had built at the beginning. You come back to the depth of that space that you have built through time. And so it's much more powerful. You remember being the bottom of the whole ocean instead of just and the more you do that, the more you get to the bottom. And once you get to being the whole, then that feeling can be so powerful that nothing can make you drift. And you start going around in the world and doing things in a way that, like, yes, you allow yourself to be, kind of like to go with the flow of the mundane actions that you have to do every day. But when you come back, you're like, okay, I'm actually the whole. I'm not just this little human fighting with this other human, which you are not even gonna fight anymore, because you're gonna understand how meaningless it is to fight. And so it's just more a matter of like getting back to yourself every time. And I think in general, um these like doing these things multiple times a day, it's so important, because what we don't understand is that our life really, it's like stress in general makes our physical body go into oxidative stress, and our physical molecules literally get degraded and change. And so even if our mind would like to be our spiritual self, would like to be more active and more present, we can't tap into that frequency, because our body is not the proper antenna anymore. So our body is just an antenna for whatever frequency we want to embody, we want to be. And we can tap into that frequency if our body is in its most functional phase and most functional state. And so if we allow stress to change our body to the point that it's all inflamed and oxidated and not really functional, then we're not going to be conscious enough to even understand that we're drifting. But even if we are, we're not going to be able to tap into that space anymore. So it's so fundamental, and that's why we all this specific series was not just one episode, because it's a lot of different things that we need to do to counteract the stress that we experience in society. And so going back to that, because stress really comes from the mind, comes from how we perceive the world and how we react to the world, going back to the sacred space multiple times a day and grounding multiple times a day can be extremely powerful, because it allows you to avoid drifting too much, to avoid reacting to the world too much. And so every time your body starts oxidating and starts having these negative reactions that may make you drift through time to the point that they disable you, you kind of go back every time. And so imagine if you do this multiple times a day, you're never going to be drifting anymore. So there's so many things that contribute to really preventing us from allowing ourselves to be drifted by everything that surrounds us. And this has a lot to do also with like this something basic psychology, really, also in the sense that we need to also start realizing that we need to put boundaries with people, to exclude from our life people who are toxic or who have to heal. Some people have to heal, so we need to understand that just we need to separate ourselves from them to be able to really keep the sacred space, because otherwise, if you allow people in your sacred space, that space is not sacred anymore. So it's also very important to really keep away all the things, as much as food and content we consume and all the things we have control over. We have control over anything that we include in this sacred space. So if on your altar you put something that is toxic for you, every time you go to pray, you're going to find that toxic thing, which is going to mess up your prayer. And so you want to make sure that your altar stays clean, that your sacred space stays sacred and clean and decluttered and nice, so that it is actually functional to your spiritual growth and to your self-development and to your inner peace. So to do that, we need to understand that we need to put fences around this sacred space, in a sense, and protect it, and can be ourselves, create this bubble. There are a lot of psychologists that tell people to create this bubble around yourself, to not allow things to get in, and to, even if people say things to you that in some way may affect you, if they bounce on your bubble, they're not going to affect you for real. So this is a way of keeping your sacred space. Is the same exact concept. So keeping your sacred space is not just to do with a specific space or doing your routines, but really of your intention to spread this, to consider this your land, this your survival niche. Just protect it and make sure that nothing gets in and poisons it, and that bad weeds, as soon as the bad weeds come in, you take them out and take them out of your sacred space. So it's important that you and I love doing this meditation of the garden, for example, to just really tell people, okay, first of all, build this sacred space, and then start planting whatever you like and making it as you like. So every time you go back to this space, you're going to have a garden in which you go back and you planted things and you have built your own garden, basically, in which you can really feel better. You can feel surrounded by things that make you feel at peace. And it doesn't have to be a garden. It can be anything that makes you feel good. But all these sort of meditations are really, when you ground, really you can go back to that mental space, are fundamental, and it's fundamental to protect it from any external factor, including the stress we receive from the news, the stress we receive from movies. So all this content that we consume that we need to cut out for us to be able to maintain that sacred space. And again, this has to do with what we are producing, how we are using our genes, because based on how peaceful we are, then the kind of genes we produce really change. And so taking care of this sacred space in the long term is going to change how you use your DNA, is going to change you, because how you use your DNA is what you become, right? And so if you change the way in which you use your DNA, if you start using different genes and turning off those that were for stress and turn on those that are for peace, then you're going to be more peaceful, more aligned. Your body's going to function better. Everything is going to function better. So through time, imagine you do this for a year, you're going to be a different person. Like if you start doing this practice for a year, all the things that we talked about today and in the previous episodes as well, you're going to be a completely different person. And you're also going to attract different things, because people don't realize that, for example, rich people who are rich, they have a completely different mindset as compared to people who are poor. So people are rich because they have different habits, a different mindset, not because money comes to them. In fact, there are a lot of people who are specialized in handling wealth of people who were poor and suddenly become rich, because they say that as soon as people who were poor and become rich receive money, they try to spend them all immediately, because it almost
Yeah.
makes them feel uncomfortable. They don't know how to handle money because they've never had money in their life. And
Yeah, I
so
think
it's
there's
like,
something really interesting. I think not all, but almost all major lottery winners lose all of their money within a 5-year period. Where they,
yeah,
even if these people won like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, somehow all of this money is gone in a very short amount of time. And it's exactly what you said. It's about the mind state, because they're not used to that, so they don't know how to deal with that kind of influx of power. But if they were maybe more balanced in the sense that they understood money, they understood its energy more, then they would be able to sustain it for a lot longer. Because I mean, there's a lot of people that have the mentality of like a rich person, where they're able to carry that money forward and to use it responsibly with a lot less money than a lot of these lottery winners have, that are still able to maintain it over long periods of time and use it to support themselves. So yeah,
because it's our gene.
it's interesting. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
ourselves. It's ourselves that determine how what we are. If we're rich or we're poor, it's based on our genes. So if we are activating the genes being poor, then we're going to be poor. If you're activating the genes of being rich, then we're going to be rich. And so if you're poor and you suddenly receive money, you're still poor. You just have received money. And so what happens is that unless you change your mindset and you grow and you change yourself, you become a different person through time, then that money is not for you, because you're not a person with, like, you're not a rich person. You're just someone that received money. And so this is just to talk about money, but this is the same for everything. It's the same for weddings, for marriages, it's the same for relationships, it's the same for if you receive something that you're not aligned with, you're not already someone who is supposed to have that thing, you're not going to get it. This is the same concept as rich kids, that their parents have a lot of, have built a lot of wealth and have built corporations, and they become famous, and their kids are just not, right? Because they have received all those things and they haven't actually earned them. They haven't become that person. And because they haven't become, they oftentimes they fail. They fail in doing their own thing, in being like their parents, or they ultimately, there is always this stereotype of the rich kid that, you're rich because your father is rich, right? And so there is always this stereotype, but it's not really a stereotype. It's like, because unless you become genetically and epigenetically that person, you are not. And so whatever thing you get is not really something that you are. It's something that you have acquired thanks to others, thanks to just random luck. And so you are not. And so you're not going to be as successful as someone who has earned that, because you are not. And so you just have to become that things. But you can change the way in which you use your DNA with all the ways that we taught you, and all the different, with coaching, with different kinds of coaching and yoga training and different kinds of mindset training, so that you become the person that then has the things in their life that they want, instead of being something that receives those things and then you're not going to be able to keep them, and then you're going to divorce, or you're going to have all the things that you do, because you are not that person. You have to become that person first for you to be able to keep those things and to actually acquire them in a permanent and balanced way.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And, for those of you that are interested in learning some of these tools, Nancy and I have a retreat coming up, which we're very excited about. The Heal Retreat, which is the healthy embodiment of authentic living, where we're going to be teaching you all of the techniques that we've developed, that we've discovered, that have come to us through our teachers, that really help us to live and embody a healthy life, to be present all the time, to be happy, to be abundant, to find in ourselves the peace that is our true state, that we really deserve to be in all the time. And then also to empower us to share that with the world, and to, coming out after the retreat being these beacons of light where we can bring other people to the same states that we've come to ourselves. So it's really powerful. And one other thing I want to touch on that is also related to this Heal Retreat is, again, going back to what you said about the influences, the surroundings, and how when you put something on your altar, it has to represent your highest good. It has to represent that divine for yourself. And then when you come into viewing yourself as the temple, or even yourself as the altar, the more that you get into that spiritual state, the more you'll realize the things that aren't serving you, and the easier it will be for you to cut them out. So again, a lot of things in the beginning, it might seem really hard. Like maybe you're someone who really likes drinking alcohol, but in some senses that's not serving you. You know that you're not in your highest self when you're drinking, but that barrier of being able to say no, I don't want to drink, is very high. But the more that you start to build out the spiritual life, the spiritual present energy and other aspects, the easier it will be to let go of the things that are really holding you back, even if it feels like they're things that you still really desire. It'll get a lot easier. These things will almost naturally fall away, and that's what I've experienced in my own personal experience. I used to really be into smoking marijuana. That was something that I used to kind of bring myself to that present state, and to get rid of my stress. But it wasn't serving my highest good. It was also bringing in anxiety. It was bringing me to a state where I would get to that high, but then afterwards I would get into this state of very tamasic energy, where I was very demotivated. I was very lazy and tired. And this state lasted a lot longer than the time where I actually felt the high, the rush from the marijuana. So when I started doing meditation every day, despite really feeling like someone that loved marijuana, that I really saw myself using this for a long time, it took almost no effort. It just naturally fell away. And I found that the meditation had taken its role in a much deeper and more holistic way, where now I was able to get to that same state through my own energy, and not be in a state where it led to that later imbalance. I didn't have to pay any price to get the high that I was getting now. I didn't have to come at the loss of, the next several hours of laziness and sluggishness and tiredness. I was more clear, and that clarity also extended for longer periods of time. And it didn't have that, this kind of like curve where you go up and then down. It was more like just slowly making progress upwards. So that's one other thing that's really important. And then also, one other thing I wanted to touch on is that it's really important that, again, even this relates to people. The people you surround yourself with are really important. And the more that you start to awaken, the more that you might realize some of your friends are actually not looking out for your highest good. They might be some of those people that we've talked about in previous episodes that are, very caught up in their ego, very caught up in, their trauma, and they're projecting that trauma onto you. They're projecting that ego onto you, and they're making you, enabling your bad behaviors. They're making it easier for you to kind of be in that lower state of consciousness. But the more that you spiritualize your consciousness, the more that you enter that sacred space, the easier it'll be to kind of, respectfully take a step away from these people. And also from my personal experience, the more that you do this, the more that you'll meet people that are truly aligned with you. And again, this goes back to what you're saying with the whole money thing. You are what you start getting to these different levels of being and consciousness, you start to attract to yourself the things that are in alignment with that. So the more that you enter into the spiritual path, the more that you enter into the path of self-improvement, the more that you're going to meet people that are already improving themselves, that are already on the spiritual journey themselves. and the more that you're going to be able to resonate together and grow together, because that's really the best way forward. And it's like even the Buddha said this is one of the three things that's necessary on the spiritual path. There was the Buddha, who is the original teacher. There's the Dharma, which is the teachings, and there's the Sangha, which is the group of people that receives the teachings and practices the teachings. So this Sangha, it doesn't have to be in the sense of like you go to a community religious center, although it can be like that as well. That's a very good outlet for, creating a external spiritual place that you come to with community. But it can even just be one or two friends that you have that you really share a deep intellectual, spiritual, emotional connection with, and you're able to speak about deep things, and they're there to support your highest good. This is so crucial for your development because it helps you to feel that you're not on this path alone, that there's someone that you can go to and share openly with you, and they're not gonna judge you, they're not gonna bring their ego into the conversation, they're not gonna try to bring you down, they're not gonna manipulate you, they're not gonna gaslight you, they're gonna be there for your development. And obviously we all have teachers as well, and these are also important figures, but it's also important to have those people that are around your same level of development, that are your peers in the journey, because that's how we support each other, and that's how we grow together, is by coming together. And the more that people that you find that are working with you in this way, the quicker you all grow together, because the energy comes together. It's cumulative. It builds. And, again, going back to that analogy of the fire, the more little fires that are grouped together, the more that the great bonfire itself will grow. So it's really important to find these people. And again, don't worry if you're very new to this path. The more that you're on it, these people will come. And it's about the situations you put yourself in. It's about the way that your mind works. It's the way that you're energetically aligned with people. They will come into your life. So be a little patient.
And
There is
sometimes these people,
oftentimes,
yeah,
go ahead.
sometimes
Yeah.
these people we already knew. Like sometimes,
Yeah.
like for you guys, like I met you before I even started my own spiritual journey. Before you went to India, so we met before. So we were already there. It's just that sometimes you have to wait for some time for people to have their own path and have their own journey, so that you can meet halfway. Like, and finally meet each other. And I would like to also add, after you say what you're trying to say, something about how to actually get to the point of being able to take care of your sacred space and get out
Mhm.
of maybe our own ego, our own PTSD, our own compulsion. And there are tools that I use, such as shamanic medicine, and that are also very good for that too.
Yeah. Well, just the last little point I was going to say is that oftentimes when you do start to enter these paths, you do have this kind of period where a lot of your friends and the people that you're close to in your life start to fall away. And that can feel very isolating at first, because it feels like you're all alone on this journey and there's no one to support you. But what I can say to that, if you're in that place, just hold out a little bit longer. The right people will come. You just have to really be strong in yourself and keep going on the path, and you will attract the right people. And that's what I've experienced in my own life. I have so many other friends from my past life before I was truly on this spiritual journey, that I don't talk to anyone. And there was a big period where lots of them I was kind of drifting away from, whether that was due to like distance or just like intellectually and emotionally, spiritually, we were on different planes. We were working on different things. We had different views of the world, and those didn't align anymore. And that was a tough period for a time. But now I'm surrounded by so many, everywhere that I've been in the world, I've met so many deep, spiritual, beautiful people. And so just be a little patient, and it will happen. Don't worry about that so much. It might be a little difficult in the moment, but stay strong and know that those people will come to you at the right time.
Yes, I had the same exact experience, and it took me a while as well, because I also had like we talked about that a lot in the previous episode. Like, I had a lot of like very rocky kind of path. But ultimately, if you keep going in your path and you embody your truest self and your highest self, there are a lot of people who are on the same path, and a lot of people will also go through this very rocky and challenging journey. And once you understand that, you just understand that it's a matter of time and a probability that you're gonna meet them at some point. But it's just almost certainty. It's just, especially it works better if you also put yourself in situations in which you can meet people who are on the same journey. For example, attending retreats or attending events, or going to places where people like that are more on this journey tend to go. And so if you go to those places, not everybody is going to actually be on that journey, unfortunately, because everything becomes mainstream after a while. But like a lot of people that are on their own spiritual journey do the things that you can go and do as well and meet them. And so ultimately it's just a matter of time. We're going to meet each other, all these people that are awakened, and I like the idea of the flame that gets bigger, but also for me, it's also a matter of like a network of people who are anchoring the world into a highest state of consciousness. And so we are allowing the state of consciousness of the universe and of the earth, especially, to rise. So this is so important that we meet each other and that we start working together and synergizing like you and I are doing. And look what we're doing. We're collaborating, we're synergizing, thanks to our two journeys, and now we are raising the consciousness of other people. This is beautiful, right? And so this is what happens when people that are on this journey meet and work together. What we're doing is 100 times more powerful than what we could have done by ourselves, and so it's just beautiful. It gets exponential. So just guys, meet people like you, try to stay in this journey, and really you're gonna see that things are gonna, like, you're gonna improve the world as this cell that really is aligned with the body in a much, much more spiritual way that is so beautiful. And if you feel like it's difficult sometimes to get to the point in which you are clear-minded enough, or your body allows you to actually be in your sacred space. Most of the times, the problem is that we are on PTSD, we have compulsive thinking, and our body is under stress. So we have a lot of stress hormones in our circulation, and our body is really under stress and inflamed. So there are tools that you can use that really help, which are, for example, the shamanic medicine tools, which I serve. Like I serve Kambo, which is a special type of shamanic medicine that allows people to cleanse from stress and from PTSD and from all these things and to reset. And this is one of the things that I do. I also do, for example, the Reset Your Body that is gonna come up soon. It's a group liver and gallbladder cleanse that helps you declutter from the inside out, so that you also can declutter from all of these things and allow yourself to reset and again get back to your clear mind. And because of that, you're going to be able to take care of that sacred space. Because sometimes it's not that we don't want to, it's really that our body doesn't allow us to realize that we need to take care of these sacred space. And so first of all, decluttering is the first thing you need to do. Cleansing and decluttering and purging. And there are a lot of shamanic medicines and different kinds of practices that allow you to do that specific thing that allows your body physiology to improve and to reset by getting rid of molecules that were keeping you stuck. And so by doing that, then you're resetting, you're starting from a clean slate, and then you're going to immediately realize that you need to take care of your sacred space, that you need to start a more healthy practice, to need to have a meditation, they need to do yoga, they need to meet more like-minded people. So it's all like steps, because sometimes it's just not even our fault. It's not that we don't want to or we're lazy. It's our body that doesn't respond to us, and that really is so inflamed, so oxidized, that really doesn't allow us to realize that we need to take a break and that we need to reset. And so because of that, I'm also organizing an one-day retreat in LA. So in case you guys want to meet me in person before the here retreat, or you want to know how shamanic medicine works and you want to experience a more spiritual and sacred space, is actually called the sacred space. If you want to experience that, which includes ice bath and cold and sauna cycles as well. And it's just one day, so that you get to experience at least a little bit of reset and understanding what that means. And then potentially you can also join us for the October retreat, the here retreat. But let us know. This is going to be on the 22nd of September. And if you want to join us to either one of these retreats, you can just contact us either just in the comments or through our websites. The website
And we'll put
is
links to both of these events down below,
yeah,
so check it out.
absolutely. Check it out.
Check
And
it
the
out.
link to the Heal Retreat is 360holisticcoach.com/heal. And for the sacred space, feel free to DM me or to check my website as well, which is 360holisticcoach.com. And you can just check it out and you'll find all the retreats and all the things that we're doing. And just feel free to DM us on Instagram as well at 360holistic.coach for me, and Robie
And
Newman-Paris.
Yes, exactly. At Robie Newman-Paris for
Yes.
me. So we're always open to hear any feedback, whether it's critiques or whether it's, we love this, whether you have questions or something specific that you want us to talk about, or maybe you are someone that you feel like you want to be interviewed on our podcast, or someone that would be a good fit for being interviewed. We're always open to find new people that have interesting perspectives on the process of awakening and healthy living to interview. So if this sounds like you or sounds like someone you might know, then please feel free to reach out. And again, we're so grateful that you've taken the time to make it to the end of this episode and that you stuck around. I hope that you gained something from this episode, that you maybe got a little bit more perspective, a new way of looking at things. Maybe you want to think of a couple little rituals that you can put into your day-to-day life to bring some of that spiritual place, that spiritual consciousness into your daily consciousness. So again, we're very grateful for you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.